The shooting and murder of United HealthCare CEO Brian Thompson by the alleged gunman Luigi Mangione in New York City on December 4th, 2024, kicked off a massive manhunt unlike any that we've seen in recent months, and also kickstarted a national debate on the rising costs of healthcare. Now, the CEO shooting suspect, Luigi Mangione, is probably not related to the great jazz musician Chuck Mangione. But I'm willing to bet that his brother Mario is probably pretty upset about his arrest. On November 24th, 2024, the CEO shooting suspect arrives in New York City in Midtown Manhattan at the Port Authority bus station at Northwest 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, which is right in Times Square. The suspect's mother had reported him missing just a week before in San Francisco, where she thought he was living, and she thought he was still working for TrueCar. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this logistics here and the way he was planning this, and the fact that he arrived on a bus from Atlanta, because this is going to play into some of our deep questions later on here as to what's really going on with the feds. So here's where the Port Authority bus terminal is here. Times Square is right here. And of course, Central Park is up here. And then the Hilton, where the shooting would take place 10 days later, is right over here. So the suspect gets in a cab and he takes a cab ride up here into the area of the Hilton, and he hangs around in this area for a half an hour. He then takes another cab up to his hostel up in the Upper West Side. Keep in mind, folks, we're getting all of this information from the police, and they did it by tracking all of the cameras. You know, nothing is private anymore. They can pretty much track you from point A to point B. So in that cab, he leaves right over here, which is the Hilton, right there. And he takes a cab up to his hostel, which is way up here at 891 Amsterdam. Way over here, just on the Upper West Side, just a few blocks west of Central Park, right here. And so this is the hostel that he checks into right here, the High New York City Hostel. And you can see its relationship to Central Park over here. Now, when the police arrested the CEO shooting suspect, Luigi Mangione, a week later, they found in his possession this allegedly fake ID here, which the police tell us is the exact same ID that he used to check into this hostel in New York. So he's been very sloppy. Now, here is where he makes his first really huge mistake. And this is the mother of all mistakes you could possibly make, folks. In fact, this is what police are calling maybe the linchpin in the entire case that allowed them to solve the case. When he was checking into the hostel there, he was doing some little flirtatious activity with one of the female employees there behind the counter. And he let down his guard and he let down his mask. And that's where we got that now famous picture that was circulated all around the country that was helping to capture him. Now, this is what the rooms look like, and because it is an inexpensive hostel, he probably had roommates, and he also had this communal bathroom. Okay, so it is now Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, the day of the murder. Police say that they have the suspect leaving the hostel at about 5:30 in the morning, possibly on a bike, maybe even a city bike. And the reason why they might have thought that, there was a city bike rental location right next to the hostel, so he may have taken that. So if you look at this map of Manhattan, here's where the hostel is up here, and he's going to make it all the way down here, but he was seen 10 minutes later. I really don't see how he could have gotten down there that fast. Maybe, I guess, at that moment of time in the morning, maybe you could, but I don't know. That's a large number of blocks to have to cover to get from all the way up there to all the way down here past Central Park. So remember, the Hilton is right here. So anyway, he arrives down here at the Hilton, and he must have parked a bike somewhere around 55th Street over here somewhere. Must have locked it up over here. And the police said that they had spotted him. They've got him on cameras going back and forth between 54th Street and 53rd Street here on 6th Avenue, just pacing back and forth. So a few minutes later, after pacing around up and down the street right over here, remember the Hilton is right here. You see the finger pointing there. He walks over here to this Starbucks, which is on 6th Ave, which is Avenue of the Americas, and it's at the intersection of 56th, West 56th Street right here. He goes into this Starbucks, I believe a water and 2 Kind bars. Those are those protein bars. And here, once again, the New York Police Department Crime Stoppers released these photos from the security camera at the Starbucks that captured him in there making the purchase. And this right here, I think, is another crucial mistake that he makes, because why would you go into a Starbucks 1 block from the crime scene there? And now they've got you on camera, and now the cops know what you bought. And when you eventually discard that bottle of water and those wrappers from the Kind bars, now they can get your fingerprints and your DNA. Big mistake. So then at 6:20 a.m., let's take a look at what was happening. The Hilton is right here. The Starbucks is right over here at 56th Street. And so the CEO shooter walks here from the Starbucks, walks down this way, and turns on 55th Street and walks right by this deli here, this right in front of the Stage Star Deli. And it looks like he's putting something into the trash. I can't tell if it's a wrapper or the water bottle. But it certainly does look like he is stopping right there and putting something into the trash. See, this is where he went. He turned the corner right here and was walking right by the Stage Star Deli right here. You see that? Now, this is where it's really starting to get critical, because we're 15 minutes before the shooting. The Hilton is here, and then here is the Hilton Park. This is their garage, and the Hilton is over here. And somewhere right back in this area is where the CEO is going to be shot in about 15 minutes. But at this point in time, which is 6:29 a.m., the suspect was caught walking right by here on this sidewalk by this camera sitting right here. You see that camera right there on the wall? That's the camera. I don't think it was this camera due to the angle, and I'll show you in a second. And just remember these 3 white pieces of concrete spalling right here on the sidewalk, and these dashed lines on the road, and then this big white spot over here. Now here's the video, and there's the suspect walking there, and he appears to be talking to somebody on the phone at this point in time. So the investigators are definitely going to want to get inside that phone to see if he was talking to somebody and who. And then as we look at this again in slow motion, you can see as he's walking down the sidewalk, there's those 3 white spots I showed you. So this is directly across the street from the Hilton. And keep in mind the clock says 7:29, but it's probably really 6:29 because of the daylight savings was recently, and maybe they didn't update their clock. So it looks like essentially what he did when he left the Starbucks, he traveled here, went up 55th Street here, and he most likely came through this little passageway back over to 54th Street. And then right over here is where that parking lot was. And then this right here is the last known point of us seeing him captured on video. Obviously, the police must have a lot more than they've given us so far. But somewhere he went from here to hiding across the street between the cars here, waiting for the CEO to leave his hotel, which I believe was right over here. Okay, so Brian Thompson, the CEO of United HealthCare, was likely staying at this hotel. I've heard a couple of reports that this is the hotel he was staying at, the Luxury Collection, across the street from the Hilton. And so he simply got out and left at about probably 6:40 in the morning, and the Hilton is right up here about a half a block past the UPS truck. So he likely walked down this sidewalk right here, and it's right around the time that he got into this area that he was shot. So if we come over here and we look at it, you really can't see much in the daytime. But this, of course, is where the limos were parked that we saw in that now famous video. And we do know that right after the shooter killed the CEO, he immediately ran across the street here and ran right through this plaza over here. And here's that now famous video that CNN obtained from the security cam. Now, I'm not going to show you anything because YouTube will demonetize me if I do that. So we're simply just not allowed to show that here. Now, I'll slow it down a little bit. And here you can see the shooter emerges from in between the 2 cars. So he had been lying in wait. And the police said he allowed other people to walk by. He didn't shoot them. So this wasn't necessarily a random shooting. It looked like this was. And there's another person standing right there also that managed to scoot away. Now, as I mentioned earlier, here's where that CEO shooter starts to make his getaway. He's going to casually just walk between the cars and then start to run across the street through that plaza. And that is where police say that the shooter dumped his cell phone. And one other thing I wanted to point out to you, too, is look at those limos right there. Look, they're on. It looks like their engines are on. The lights are on. So there must have been more witnesses there and possibly other cameras in there as well. Okay, and then so the suspect took off through the plaza here, and it is in this plaza where police tell us that he dumped the phone. I think this photo was taken by one of the limo drivers right there at the murder scene, because this is the viewpoint from those cars heading over towards 55th Street. And then here you can see there's another witness right there standing there. Don't know if this witness is aware that he just shot and killed the CEO of United HealthCare. And I'm also wondering, these looks like they might be cameras here. Like, I don't know if that's a security camera on this pole or maybe some of these others up here. It's kind of hard to tell. So there may be more video of him running through this plaza that comes to light later on. Okay, here's where things are starting to get suspicious. Here's where I have two really big questions here concerning this case that nobody's talked about. I don't see anybody answering it, but how about this? How is it that the CEO shooting suspect knew to be waiting behind these cars here for the CEO to come just walking by so he can come by and shoot him in the back there? Was there some kind of advance notice? Did he get help from somebody else? Did he hack into a computer system or something and get the CEO's itinerary? Did he trick somebody into accidentally volunteering that information to him? It just seems really strange that he shows up right around this time here and only has to wait a few minutes for the CEO to come walking by. That means, how did he know that the CEO was staying at the hotel across the street and not at the Hilton? You know, because then he wouldn't have needed to be waiting outside. So he must have known something. These are the key questions here that I think investigators should be asking him. So I'm wondering, hey, when he was on the phone there walking by in that parking lot, was he maybe talking to somebody that was saying, hey, the CEO is on his way down, get over there now? Or is he just a lone wolf acting by himself? And here's something else that I stumbled upon too that I wanted to show you, because this has me even asking more questions, is when you look here on the United Health's website, here's their investor relations page, and they're talking about the IC24. That's their conference that was supposed to take place then. And so right here, if you look at the view the press release, I'm looking here, and they're talking about the press conference, and it says that it will be in New York City on Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, beginning at 8 a.m. Eastern. So it looks like the CEO was arriving about an hour and 15 minutes or so early. But look at the date of this press release, November 26th, 2024, right here. See that? Are you wondering the same thing I am? If this press release came out on November 26th, how is it that our good friend, the shooter, knew ahead of time, like far enough ahead of time to plan the whole thing and then travel into New York and then even be there 2 days before this press release even comes out? So this is what has me wondering what's going on. Okay, my other big question here is, why aren't the feds involved? Why has the FBI not been brought into this? And I'll tell you why. You might not know about this, and I'm pretty sure that the shooting suspect, Luigi Mangione, probably is unaware of this too. But if you travel across state lines to commit a crime and you're caught, depending on the crime, that now becomes a federal crime. It becomes a federal felony. You could be charged under the Hobbs Act, maybe the Mann Act. But certainly that becomes a federal crime because you traveled to go commit this crime. Because of the nature of these crimes here, this guy, if he's found guilty, belongs in a federal prison. Let me remind you folks here too, that one great thing about this rule here about traveling, interstate and committing these felonies is that when you get sent to a federal prison, you have to do 85% of the time. There's none of this super soft, California slap on the wrist and, oh, he was good boy in prison, so let's release him early. You have to serve 85% of your sentence when you go to a federal prison.
We're not going to white-collar resort prison. No. We're going to federal pound me in the ass prison.
I don't want to go to any prison.
I hereby sentence you as in a federal pound me in the
So the shooter ran through this plaza right here, And this is where the police say he dropped his phone and then continued on to 55th Street, grabbed his bike, and went up 6th Avenue here straight into Central Park. And that's when News Nation got some exclusive video of him driving his bike right here into the park.
In the first angle, you can see him riding up 6th and stopping to wait at the red light. That's the entrance to the park, and it's like home free, right? In a next angle, we get a closer view of him stopping at the same stoplight, and you can see he's still got that gray backpack. Third angle, this time from the front, shows him heading into the park as well. So we got all of these unique angles that I am 100% sure. There he goes, right into the park.
So you'll notice here that the timestamp says 6:45. Well, he could not have made it to Central Park, 3 or 4 blocks away from the Hilton here if he shot the CEO at 6:44. So therefore, I think the original reporting or maybe the time given by the police might have been wrong. He was probably shot closer to 6:40, and it probably would have taken him about a minute or two to run across that plaza, get on that bike, and ride that bike up to Central Park. So, if you're a fan of Marvel like me and you've seen Loki and you know how valuable this sacred timeline is. So I'm analyzing all of this. I need to make sure everything lines up perfectly because you know that the defense attorney is going to look at all of this and say, well, how could they say he was over here when 2 minutes later he was over here and he couldn't be at 2 places in the same time? You know what that means, don't you? Shadow of a doubt. And that's what will get him off if they don't get these timelines all lined up properly. So the New York police, knowing that he emerged out of Central Park without his backpack, started searching and even dove in the lake there searching for it. They finally found it. Once the CEO shooter entered Central Park, not much is known, but the police were able to recover his backpack in there. When the suspect rode into Central Park, he could have dumped his backpack somewhere over here by this lake, or maybe he rode around and up here and dumped stuff off near this lake. That's why they were searching there. The police did not specifically state where they found his backpack, so we don't know yet. But we do know they said that he popped out here on 77th Street and went up here to Columbus and was going north on Columbus. So he popped out of Central Park at 6:56 a.m. And then up here at 86th Street in Columbus, he's moving along here, and here's 86th Street. This is the area where he was captured on video, as you can see here, riding his bike still, and of course minus the backpack. All right, so here's what I'm questioning. So here he is down here at Columbus in 86th, and he ditches the bike right around here to get in a cab. But let me just point something out to you. Here we are, he's right here, but follow him right here, where this is where his hostel is. So I'm trying to determine, was he thinking of going back to the hostel, or did he change his mind and say, you know what? I better just get completely out of Dodge here. There could be cops waiting for me there. Who knows? You just never know. And I'm going to get out of Dodge. And so he gets into a cab. And of course, here you can see his picture when he's inside the cab. This was another time that he was captured on video. I wonder if he knew that he was being captured again, because there you had a pretty good view of his eyebrows, and he has some very distinctive eyebrows. And this will be a source of controversy for us. So pay attention to this, because we're going to be discussing this momentarily. And it's a smart thing for the suspect that he avoided going back to the hostel, because the police were later on there concentrating a lot of effort here on unit number 407, which is allegedly where he was staying in that hostel. So he's in the taxi cab right here at the corner of 86th and Amsterdam, and he's driving north all the way up through Amsterdam and passes right by his hostel, which was at 891 Amsterdam Avenue, and keeps going all the way up here through Harlem. Takes it all the way up north, keeps going way up north here, and ends up right over here, and I'll zoom in on it. This right here is where the bus station is, and it's right here at the foot. Let me back out a little bit. Right here at the foot of the George Washington Bridge. So they said that he got into this bus station, and they have video of him entering the bus station, but does not come back out. And I'm not sure if they knew which bus that he was on, but they just knew that he got on one of these buses. And my guess is that the bus probably went right across the George Washington here through New Jersey. And we now know that he was later found, of course, in Pennsylvania. Just knew that he got on one of these buses. And my guess is that the bus probably went right across the George Washington here through New Jersey. Okay, so the bus drives from New York here all the way over to Altoona, Pennsylvania, which, as you can see, is right here. And it's about 200 miles away. Now, for 5 days, the only thing police had to go on was these two pretty clear pictures they got of the subject at the hostel where he was staying before he fled New York. And it's just so amazing to me that of all of the people in the world that could have seen the picture, nobody came forward. Even though he was sort of popular, he had lots of social media accounts, he was not a recluse, he was certainly had a large online presence, and yet nobody came forward to say, hey, I know this guy. And then finally, a break in the case. He stopped off at this McDonald's here in Altoona, Pennsylvania. I don't know if the bus let off right there or what he was doing or how he got there. But he's in there eating breakfast at this McDonald's. And some customers spot him and they were joking with each other. Hey, that looks like the CEO shooter. And they were kind of joking amongst themselves about it. But one of them said, you know what, I think that's him. And he had an employee call 911 and the police showed up. The police see him there eating with his mask and they tell him to take down his mask. And when he does here, the police instantly recognize him and they start to question him further and search his backpack. He gives the police officers this fake ID, allegedly, which police later said was the exact same ID he used to check into the hostel when he was staying there in New York. Okay, now, of course, he's innocent until proven guilty, right? But let's say he did do the murder. What kind of fool would bring all of that evidence with him? Ditch all of that stuff. Throw it in the trash somewhere. Get it away from you. He's not as smart as he thought he was, you see, because now the police can put him at the hostel. So there goes any chance of shadow of a doubt, because that's the same ID that he checked in with at the hostel. The police can put him there, and then from there they can put him traveling down to the murder scene.
That's why you're under arrest for hindering prosecution.
And so this was the point when the cops finally ID'd him for the first time as Luigi Nicholas Mangione, and they bring him down to a holding cell. So here you can see they're transporting him for the first time, and they're taking him into his new hostel where he doesn't need an ID to check in. And while he was there, of course, they took these photos of him there in the little holding cell that they had him in. And, of course, right away, a lot of the jokes and memes started circling on the internet. This, of course, is not a real tweet from Burger King. And so, of course, the Sopranos are going to chime in here and tell us what happens if you snitch. And here comes the obligatory perp walk. And then the next morning, they brought him in for his arraignment, and he did that now famous outburst.
Oh my God, that's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
Wow, this guy's just a little bit off kilter. So this adds to the craziness. First of all, I couldn't even understand what the heck he was saying. It was just a bunch of words put together that had no meaning whatsoever. So whatever he was trying to get out, and he basically had 5 seconds to tell the reporters, hey, did I do it or didn't I do it, or am I justified in it? We couldn't even figure out what the heck he's trying to say to us at this point. So this guy, he's not even a rebel without a cause. This guy's just a rebel without a clue. Doing something like this just sort of adds to your guilt, I would think, even though, remember, he's presumed innocent until guilty. But making a scene like that is not something that even most criminals do. They just walk quietly from the car to the building. So when I go to the Blair County, Pennsylvania clerk of the court there, and I pull up the criminal docket, you can see right there, there's Luigi Nicholas Mangione. And then when you look down here at his list of charges, they're right down here. See under the category charges there? Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. So the first one here is forgery. He utters a forged writing. That's probably the fake ID that he had, the same one that he presented at the hostel. The next one here would be firearms not to be carried without a license. So he had a ghost gun. That's without a serial number or a license for it. And then right here, tamper with records or ID. And that's probably, the fake ID because he created it. And then the next charge here would be possession of an instrument of crime with intent. That's owning the gun and possibly intending to use it in a crime. Or maybe because he had a silencer there and the silencers are illegal. And what good could that be? It's false identification to a law enforcement officer. So when the cops asked him who he was, he gave them the fake ID at first. Here in Florida, we also call this charge obstruction of justice. And also sometimes it'll be written down as resisting arrest without violence. So that is the category that sometimes falls into in other states. So these are the 5 charges he faces in Pennsylvania. Now, when the police captured him, they found his gun and the silencer were actually 3D printed. We don't know if he made them or not.
We were able to match that gun to the 3 shell casings that we found in Midtown at the scene of the homicide.
See, in all of these cases here, these serial killers were very arrogant, and they were certainly highly narcissistic in their actions. For example, the Zodiac killer taunted police for years. And also the BK killer, who turned out to be a gentleman named Dennis Rader, he was taunting the police also. So a lot of times these murderers tend to be very arrogant, and they think that they're smarter than the police. They think they're smarter than everybody else. But even the BK killer screwed himself over big time, because while he was taunting the police, he sent them letters on an old-fashioned floppy drive, and he had no idea. This is something that I bet a lot of you didn't know. When you erase a file on your computer, that file's not gone. It's just not there for you to see it. You know, you won't see it, but it's on the disk, and it can easily be extracted off of that disk with some deep scanning software. Because unless you overwrite that file with ones and zeros like they do in the military, they can easily get at you. So the BK killer, when he was taunting the police, you know what happened, right? They found an old Word document on the floppy that he had erased, but it wasn't gone. It wasn't deleted completely. And so they were able to retrieve it, and on there it said last saved by Dennis Rader. And it said, you know, whatever the name of the church was that he was supposedly a congregation leader in. And so that's how they caught him. So his own arrogance got him caught. I compared these charts here to compare Luigi Mangione's behavior to some of the well-known murderers of the past. And so these are the narcissistic traits. So one here, of course, targeting the high-profile individual. So it has a desire for attention or perceived superiority and seeking public recognition. And so it seems like some of those statements that he made, especially like in his manifest that they recovered, might show that he's kind of maybe influenced by Ted Kaczynski, who was the Unabomber. Of course, rationalizing violence, as he did, arrogance towards authorities, and criticizing doctors online, as he did, and viewing himself as justified or important enough to disrupt the life of a prominent individual. That's where the grandiosity comes from. Because as you know, narcissists tend to have an elevated sense of self-importance. Then when we get to the Zodiac killer, you can see here he repeatedly sent letters and ciphers to the police, you know, taunting them, and desire for public recognition. So he kept insisting in his letters the need for recognition and validation of his perceived superiority. He bragged about killing 37 people, but in reality, I think they found out it was a lot less than that. Manipulative tendencies. He was just trying to make the public be gripped in fear. And of course, the lack of empathy. And they still don't know who the Zodiac killer is, although a group of investigators thinks that it's this guy here, Gary Post. And of course, we have Ted Bundy. And so here's his narcissistic traits. He was very charming and manipulative. You know, back in the day, he was supposedly a good-looking guy that a lot of girls easily fell for. And so he would take advantage of that and manipulate them. Of course, his grandiosity, he believed he was smarter and more capable. And in fact, he was in some cases. He escaped the police custody like 2 or 3 times. He had a sense of entitlement, power over others, and of course, the lack of empathy. He craved attention. He loved the media coverage and the notoriety of his crimes at the trial. And even though everybody pretty much knew he was guilty, he frequently denied the guilt and shifting the blame, manipulating a false image of innocence. This is what happens a lot with narcissists. And then, of course, you have the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski himself, who we could find evidence online that Luigi was influenced by this guy. But again, here, he had intellectual superiority. He believed his ideas were superior, and he sought that recognition for them. And he had that deep need for it. He expressed frustration at not being understood or acknowledged by society. Hey, why don't you guys understand why I have to do these bombings and kill all these people? Come on, get on board here. His violent actions, so his violence stemmed from his radical beliefs and personal grievances, not just necessarily from the narcissism. And he probably had mental health issues. Paranoia also, and social isolation were significant factors. So there you have Luigi compared to the other famous murderers. So Luigi Mangione, as you could tell here by now, what he did was his level of where he thought he was, his grandiose is way up here, and his arrogance is way up here, but his actual capabilities were probably somewhere down here. That's why the cops were able to outsmart him. Just like the other murderers that I revealed here and showed you, they made mistakes too because they got too far ahead of themselves. They got too smart. Luigi had the gun and the silencer on him. Guess what? Now the cops can put him at the crime scene. If he had just thrown the gun out, now you have plausible deniability. You have shadow of a doubt, okay? But now the cops can put him at that crime scene with that gun. And also, don't forget that the police found his water bottle and they found one of his wrappers for the Kind bar, and they got his fingerprints off both of those. So they can also put him at those scenes as well. But it's still hard to figure out how this kid who came from such a prominent family, the Mangione family is very wealthy in Maryland. And in fact, they actually donated the whole building and pool center there at Loyola University. And that's a huge expense. So they are pretty well loaded. And this kid was set for success he graduated from the Gilman School there in Maryland, which is probably one of the most prestigious high schools. And believe it or not, he was even valedictorian of his high school, and he gave the speech at his graduation back in 2016.
Here's valedictorian Luigi Nicholas Mangione. Luigi.
Headmaster Smythe, Mr. Hubeck, members of the Board of Trustees.
Now, I was thinking about the fact that he went to University of Pennsylvania, right? But it's too bad that he didn't go to Penn State, because this would have made for the funniest memes, don't you think? How about this? Going from Penn State to the state pen. So if Luigi Mangione really is the CEO shooter, why do you think he did it? I mean, what do you think happened to him? Did he become radicalized by reading some of this stuff that he did online? If you look at some of his postings on Goodreads, maybe he read too many books in the wrong direction and he just went bonkers, Maybe it was results of having that back surgery that he had. Now, he was foolish because he already had back problems. Then he injured his back again, even worse, by surfing. And then he went and got the back surgery, and they put 4 screws in his back there. And who knows, maybe from all the medication and everything later on, maybe he got a loose screw up here in the head. Hopefully this will all come out on the trial, and we'll get a glimpse into what may have happened to this guy that at one point in his life, not too long ago, he seemed to have it all. He seemed to be on the right track and everything. And guess what? Now the police are saying that he wasn't even insured by United HealthCare at all. So it's like he just randomly picked Brian Thompson, the CEO of United HealthCare, I guess maybe to represent all of the bad guys, and let's go and kill him, which makes it even more arrogant. Now, here's where it gets interesting and even personable for me personally, folks, because you've probably heard of the concept that everybody in the world is connected by 6 degrees of separation. Well, in this case, I'm connected to the CEO shooter suspect by 1 degree of separation, and that is via his company where he supposedly worked, TrueCar, although he doesn't work for them anymore. According to TrueCar, he hasn't worked for them since 2023. But those of you who know me very well, then you know that we also have this other website called carbuyingtips.com, where we've had it up since 1999, and we give you advice on buying cars and avoiding the car dealer scams. And we also have another channel here on YouTube for the carbuyingtips.com as well. But on there, we've had TrueCar as an advertiser for years, and we know some of the people from TrueCar as well. So that was kind of shocking when I first found out. Wow, when I looked on his LinkedIn page, and I see right there, man, that he's working for TrueCar, that was like such a mind blower. Of course, I've never met him personally. Okay, well, certainly if we have any major developments in this case that allows us to further the analysis, we'll do another video for this. In the meantime, I want you to take a look at these 2 videos over here. This one up here especially is one of the better videos that I did on the Trump assassination attempt. And then this one down here is one that I did on the Ocean Gate Titan sub-implosion recently from the Coast Guard hearings into what was going on. So make sure that you binge watch all of these here, and we'll see you on the next one.